Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 74 of the Lord Ninja Choke MMA Picks podcast. Today, I'm joined by Will in the UK and Josh in Australia. I'm Dom, I'm based in the US, and today we're breaking down UFC Shanghai, headlined by Umar Nurmagomedov and Song Yadong, with a co-main of Xianoan and Denise Gomes. Let's take a look at the card. We are going to focus on the fights outlined in red. 4 fights in total. And outside of that, I believe, Josh, you flagged some exclamations here to be wary of.
Yeah, I mean, I should really flag the whole freaking event because whenever you look at the dogs for each fight, there's always like a pathway that they can win, and so I'll save you guys the trouble of like listening to me yap for about 20 minutes, and I'll just go to the main 3 there. Batbayar is a dog leading into the fight against Lima, and I'm going to break this down later on, I believe, but I just don't trust Lima after his last performance against Borjas. He looked like a shell of his proper self, and we as in probably both of us or all 3 of us here, we've seen Batbayar fight before. He's a bull in the cage, right? He's crazy, he's very aggressive, so maybe there's an upset there. I'll talk more about that later. And then Xiaolong versus Francesco Nuzzi. Nuzzi is someone who I highlighted a while ago when he fought in Cage Warriors 195 in Rome. He is a fantastic striker. He has great kicks. He has the I think he's got the height, but he's got the athleticism to make this a very difficult one for Xiaolong. And I know that Xiaolong's like the hometown favorite kind of fighter, but he is not very good. His record is mildly padded. It should be more closer to 19-10 rather than 27-10. So it's one of those weird Chinese fighter who has a padded record for fighting someone who has been brought up properly through the Fight Pass promotions. And then lastly, Pilastri versus Jingnang. I don't like Pilastri too much. I think that there are some issues that she has defensively. She likes to lean back a lot. She likes to be a bit defensively focused on distance and not much on the fundamentals of boxing or striking when it comes to raising your guard, modifying your shell. So I feel like Pilastri is going to win, but against Jingnan, the 39-year-old almost Chinese fighter who's got punches and bunches and has no power, it's possible that she can win. So there is an upset opportunity there. But as a whole, this whole card is disgusting. I'm just happy because it's selling at 8 p.m. here, which is a rarity here. I get to finally eat pizza like at night time. It's great. So yeah, it's an okay card, but overall, chaos. Yeah. How about you, Will? Do you have anything to say here?
These kind of cards are always a blind spot for me. My philosophy is that you need to have seen somebody fight UFC level competition at least once to have any sort of strong read on them. It's another reason why I don't bet on Dana White's Contender Series. And we were just talking before we went on air about like a minus 2,000 main event on Contender Series just losing. So kind of backs that one up. And obviously a lot of these guys and girls have come from Road to UFC, which is an even more unreliable version of Contender Series in my mind. So it's basically a minefield for me whenever it comes to like the Asian side of the UFC talent. So I usually sort of circle the fights between people that I recognize the names of who've been in the UFC for a fair amount of time, which kind of cuts half the card off as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, like I'm sure there are some great dogs and some really good angles on like the prelims and stuff, but I'm completely blind to it myself.
Let's take a look at the main event, since this should be an absolutely great fight. Slides forward. Yeah, in the bantamweight division, we've got Umar against Song. And yeah, I mean, this is on the odds, it's a squash match. Umar is a huge favorite. I don't know what he currently is now. I think he must be like minus 500. And Song is at the like plus 400 range. So that means I think you're looking at like 1.2 and 5 if you're looking at decimal. And you know, I kind of get it, because if you look at Umar's record, he's only lost once. That was to Merab, who's, you know, he's Merab, and I think he got injured in that fight as well. So you could almost say that he's pretty much undefeated, except for getting injured in a very close fight against the champion. I think he lost 3-2 in that fight, but he hurt his arm early on. Still managed to fight out the rest of the championship fight, which is pretty impressive. He has been knocked down a couple of times. Just looking at his records, he was knocked down by Beksat Almakan, but he recovered. That was an early flash knockdown in round 1. He recovered and grappled him for 3 rounds. And pretty much the same thing happened against Mario Bautista, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know which round the knockdown happened, but Mario Bautista knocked down Umar and then got grappled for 3 rounds. So I think most people are expecting Umar to grapple Song for a few rounds here. I think even Song himself is probably expecting to be grappled for quite a large portion of this fight, which I'm sure the Shanghai fans won't appreciate. But guys, what do you think about how wide these odds are? They're justified. Do you see any path to victory for Song?
I feel like the odds are justified to an extent. I mean, there's always like a puncher's chance whenever it comes to Song, but like whenever you see Umar and his quite clean style of typical Dagestani stuff, I just can't see him deviating from that and thus losing the fight. Whenever it comes down to Song, though, I feel a little bit skeptical, because I know that Song is training at Team Alpha Male, and he has the great gym behind him with the butt chin dude. I forgot his name. Uriah Faber. I feel like whenever Faber coaches fighters, they lose a bit of what made him great. And I'm not saying that Song has lost what made him great, but I think he has somewhat lost that sting when it comes to his greatness, really. Like he's too clean now. He's too patient, he's too methodical. And you can't be that against Umar, because Umar is going to be in your face and getting takedown after takedown anyway. He's going to be going for those head kicks and whatever. He's overall someone who can pressure for 5 rounds very well, which doesn't bode well for Song, who tends to rely on footwork, range management, a variety of skills on the feet and all that stuff to win fights. Now I'm gonna again attack Song here because I feel like a prick. Song comes from a long line of can crushing in some sense, right? I have, and this is going to be a repetitive theme here this episode probably, but I have a extreme distrust in fighters who come from the WLF organization in China. It's a heavily politicized, heavily corrupt kind of organization in which, you know, money, it gets passed around willy-nilly, like thousands of dollars, whatever, just so a fighter can win and all that. You know, it's yuck. And so whenever you look at Song's record, and soon later on I'm going to talk about Yan in the same degree, you have to hold some sort of spook, right? Some sort of hesitancy when it comes to picking Song. And I know that, you know, Dom is siding with Song, and maybe that's a spoiler if he didn't say that already. But I apologize, Dom. But I feel like I just can't trust Song to do that well against someone like Umar. It's one of those weird levels to the game, and with how padded Song's record is, I just don't think it's going to be great. You know, like the odds to me make sense. You know, I'm just expecting a boring fight, because a boring fight is good for Umar, and that's just my main lean here, really. Yeah, it's just a typical UFC China event in which a lower tier, maybe that's too rude, mid-tier fighter faces a juggernaut of a name in Nurmagomedov. So that's my kind of crazy unclean. Will, you got anything?
Yeah, I mean, I feel it's more appropriate to analyze the line movement than the fight itself, really. But I think it's just the sort of Nurmagomedov tax. I know that's kind of a thing of the past, really, because people, you know, they've lost a little bit more in recent years, I think. But Yeah, it's always tough, isn't it, when you're at the top of the division and it's a main event and you've got two guys who are, usually winning against the division's best. But then suddenly there seems to be a sort of differentiation in caliber. And I guess that kind of does show itself because Song Yadong has hit his ceiling, hasn't he? He's lost to Corey Sandhagen, he's lost to Petr Yan, he's lost to Sean O'Malley. He's not going to be a champion unless he makes major changes. But that's not to say that he's bad, Whereas Umar, he hasn't lost to anybody except Merab, and Dom's already highlighted he was injured in that fight. It was there's enough conversation for there to be a slight asterisk there. And even so, it was very close. So I think people always kind of agree that if Merab didn't exist, Umar would have been champion, which is kind of weird to say considering neither of them are champion at the moment. Shout out to Petr Yan. But yeah, I expect Umar to do his thing. It's kind of tricky, really, because like when you see a -500, you always expect there to be both levels from an overall skill set perspective, but also a stylistic advantage. Like I would always want anyone who's -300 or steeper to clearly be in their wheelhouse where their opponent is weakest, if that makes sense. And I don't think Song Yadong's got grappling issues. I mean, his takedown defense sits at 73%, which is not amazing, but not terrible. But I look at all of the sort of fighters that have taken him down, and I don't really think I see a whole lot of like footage to be concerned about. I mean, Ricky Simone went 2 for 9 on takedowns and had 51 seconds of top control. I think that's pretty impressive. Petr Yan took him down twice. What does that really mean? I doubt he had much top control. Kyler Phillips out-grappled him, if I remember correctly. But now you're going really far back. So it's like, I would never trust a -500 here if I wasn't sure that Song Yadong had grappling deficiencies, and I don't think he does. So yeah, I would assume Umar wins because Umar's going to do what Umar does. Is the lazy but probably correct assessment. But I wouldn't be 80% confident, or 83% confident in him to do so.
Yeah, I think you've given a pretty good justification of why I've placed a Song moneyline bet here. I just feel like the odds are not accurate. They don't represent the true expected win rate of Umar here. And I think that Song actually has a very good record. I'm not talking about his pre-UFC record. He's been in the UFC long enough now that we can just focus on his UFC record. Luckily, he's got 12 wins and 5 losses. He's got some wins over good fighters, but actually, I think focusing on the losses tells us a lot about Song Yadong as a fighter. So he won the first round against Petr Yan in a 3-round fight, and Petr Yan actually grappled to beat him, took him down in rounds 2 and 3, and that tells you a lot about how potent the stand-up is of Song. Of course, that is exactly how Umar is going to win this fight as well. So not super helpful, but showing you the quality, right? That Song could keep it standing and win a round against Petr Yan, the incumbent champion. Some people thought that Song Yadong beat Sean O'Malley. That, again, was a close 2-1 fight. So, again, we don't learn a lot, but he's fighting against a striker who's arguably a better striker, you could say, Sean O'Malley, than Umar, or at least they're on a level. And then the loss against Corey Sandhagen, if you recall, that was actually, I believe that was a nasty cut. They had to stop the fight. It says KO TKO, but I think it was due to a really large cut above or below the eyebrow of Song Yadong. And I remember there was a momentum shift there where Song seemed to be having more success, and it was a real shame they stopped the fight. So you look at so in his last 10 fights, he's won 7 and lost 3. And the 3 he's lost are Sandhagen, Petr Yan, and Sean O'Malley, 2 of which were 2-1 fairly close decisions, competitive. And then the Sandhagen, which was an injury or a cut, sorry. So, I think there's strong reason to believe that this is going to be a competitive fight. And I don't think anyone is not expecting it to be competitive, but in a competitive fight, you would expect a competitive line. So I could see Song Yadong looking good in this fight and winning. He needs to win 3 rounds, right, out of 5. So at 5-1, I'm happy to take the pot shot. This is not a me playing Petr Yan against Merab where I felt it was like a 50-50. I do think Song Yadong should definitely be an underdog. So just to be very clear, I'm just not sure where I line it. I'd say maybe like +250 to +350. So I'm still saying Song Yadong has, like a like a third chance, possibly less, like a 25% chance, but not like as low as we're going now. Like you say, we're pushing into the teens. We're pushing like 18, 17% chance. It gets to a point where it becomes, at what point do you say that's a percentage chance of an injury? I guess it's like 1 or 2% chance of just like some fluke injury happening during the fight, or corrupt judging, 1 or 2%. So once you get to like crazy, like 90%, I just think you just can't play it. I mean, we've seen today on Dana White's Contender Series a minus 6,000 favorite lose. So stranger things have happened. I do expect Umar to be the favorite fighter, and probably it's going to be a close decision. But for that, I'm willing to place a small bet on Song. That's just how I see it.
That's totally fair. I can't really blame you for that at all. Also, just because I know it for a fact because I've looked it up before, Sandhagen versus Song Yadong, it was 2-2 on the scorecards, on 2 of the 3 scorecards. I think Song Yadong won the first 2, and then, as you said, momentum shift. But again, it's pretty impressive that Song Yadong is winning rounds against these elite guys. So I definitely take your point. Anyway, moving on to a co-main event, we have Yan Xiaonan versus Denise Gomes, which some people may find an underwhelming co-main event, but I think it makes sense for a card in China. I felt like this one was pretty clear-cut and easy to break down from my perspective. At a glance, like I feel like I made my conclusion before I taped it, and then I did a little bit of research and my mind didn't really change. There's just a big step up in competition here for Denise Gomes, and I think it's kind of hard to ignore when, by my recalling, Denise Gomes is very much a moments fighter as opposed to a minute by minute stylistic dominant fighter, if that makes sense. Her best wins when you're looking at like a pure long distance affair are either Tisha Pennington / Torres or Karolina Kowalkiewicz, and both of those women were definitely past their prime when Denise Gomes fought them. And in terms of actual striking numbers, she was even outstruck by Tisha Pennington, who historically is a very well-rounded MMA fighter as opposed to just a pure striker. I suppose you could say they aren't necessarily her best wins. Her best wins probably the KO over Yasmin Uraegi, but that came in like the first couple of minutes of the fight, and we all know now that Uraegi is chinny, which, by the way, is one of the biggest travesties in women's MMA history, because I think Uraegi could go all the way to the belt if she had a chin, but she's got nothing, which is really weird. Anyway, so in short, I kind of feel like I look at Denise Gomes' record and I see something about all of the wins that makes me go, yeah, that will come out in the wash, basically. I don't know if that's a UK term, but we'll find out eventually why there was an asterisk there, basically. And then you see her going up against Yan Xiaonan, who I suppose if I'm going to dissect her record of wins and losses the same way, I can't really make the point properly. But like, she had wins over Jessica Andrade, Mackenzie Dern, who's literally the current champion, Angela Hill, who has a win over Denise Gomes, and Tabitha Ricci, who has kind of fallen off a cliff in the last year or so, but around that time was quite well respected, and Yan Xiaonan absolutely destroyed her. She KO'd Andrade, so I guess you could say, high variance, early finish, and undermine the point like I just did. Dern and Hill aren't necessarily like elite fighters or strikers, but I still think that they're more impressive and they're more cohesive performances over 25 minutes than Denise Gomes, which I feel like I can easily pick apart. But yeah, looking at this one like minute by minute, I just think that Yan Xiaonan has done enough to demonstrate that she's just superior as a kickboxer, right? She's got better volume overall against a high level of competition, and she's got better striking defense against a high level of competition. And also just their fighting style. Xiaonan is much more of a rangy kind of, I wouldn't say patient, but you can tell she sort of is thinking about distance management, whereas Denise Gomes is like all gas, no brakes, I want to take your head off kind of thing. It's less process driven, more aggression driven, which again, when you get to the elite levels of the UFC, finishes dry up a little bit and it all comes out in the wash, to say the same phrase again. There's also the conversation that Yan Xiaonan has home advantage here. I never really know how much to make of that. I'm kind of just saying it because it's true. But, it could count for something. And I suppose, I can't remember, Chinese fans aren't the most lively. It's not like it's going to be in France. But it counts for something, right? Usually you would expect. You could balance that out with the conversation surrounding some context on Yan Xiaonan, which I think a lot of people are a little bit spooked by. Firstly, she is like 37 years old, which, if I'm being completely honest, I don't think means anything. People have raised that to me, and I don't really know why. Like, I don't have a list of them, but I'm sure there are many capable 37-year-old female fighters in the UFC. I don't think age shows up in quite the same way in women's MMA as it does in men's. You have to be, I mean, Chris Cyborg literally won last week. I mean, Liz Carmouche is one of the most dominant fighters in women's MMA at the moment. Both of those women are in their 40s, I'm sure. But also at the same time, there is a conversation about a layoff. I think it's been, how long has it been since Yan Xiaonan last fought? She last fought in 2025 in April. So that's a year and a bit. Against Verna Jandarova, which was a good performance that I was impressed by the way. But yeah, that's a layoff. It's not. I don't think it's that much of a layoff, though. I don't think, if it was like 2+ years, maybe you'd be worried about it. But I don't expect. I don't know. It just feels like one of those things where it's like you've got a slight possible angle, and people are just taking it and stretching it as a way of trying to find an angle into this fight. I just don't personally see any reason to be concerned there. Maybe I'm overlooking it, but I personally would argue that people are making a bit of a big deal about it. Another angle that I am quite interested in on this one is that I just think that stylistically, obviously I've already said that if it goes a longer distance, minute by minute, I think we expect to see Yan Xiaonan take over and just look superior. But Denise Gomes obviously likes a bit of chaos, and she has power. Yan Xiaonan has power, and no one is giving her any respect for it. Like, she dropped and hurt Weili Zhang, who is the unofficial champion of the division. She finished Andrade, which isn't the hardest thing to do, but like going toe-to-toe with Andrade in round one, when Andrade is basically like the earliest prototype version of Denise Gomes, right? Essentially with that kind of like marauding, bite down the mouthpiece and swing kind of style. Xiaonan didn't get a finish over Karolina Kowalkiewicz, but she beat the piss out of her far more than Denise Gomes did, and I think Karolina was probably more washed when she fought Denise Gomes. So yeah, I think obviously, anyone who wants to pitch Denise Gomes is probably going to be talking about damage and moments of winning as opposed to minute by minute, which is basically what I've just said. But Xiaonan can also compete in those moments. If they are going to stand in the phone booth and swing, I don't think that Xiaonan is like massively outgunned in terms of raw power. And so if those moments turn into a coin flip, you still have to be giving probability and like winning credibility to Xiaonan. So I think she can win over a longer distance, and she can also win in the fire. So yeah, that kind of concludes to looking at the betting odds. And last time I checked, which was yesterday, Yan Xiaonan is around -150, which is 60% implied probability. I just don't think mathematically that makes sense. I think that she should be in the -200 range. She should be probably maybe like 70%, in my opinion. I just think that at 115 pounds at women's strawweight, you shouldn't expect finishes. And if your fighter is finish reliant or damage reliant, you are at a disadvantage. You are naturally at an uphill battle. Yan Xiaonan has proven herself to be better. She's on home turf. And the main reason I think people are betting Denise Gomes is this narrative about age and time off. And I just personally don't think it's as big of a big deal. So yeah, I'm quite confident in Yan Xiaonan. I've got a reasonably sized bet on her. Yeah, does anybody want to pick apart anything that I've said? This one is kind of a bit rambly. I had lots of points to make. But yeah, I think Yan Xiaonan's the side person.
I mean, sorry, Dom, you want to go? I saw you unmute. Anyway.
There you go.
All right, cool. I have been, as both Dom and Will know, on the fence for about a good week now, and Will made a few good points that I kind of want to perhaps expand on and maybe add to. Yan Xiaonan obviously is fighting in her home country and all that stuff. So whenever that happens, and whenever the crowd, which is going to be full by this time, is turned on and ready to cheer, that's going to at least look to the judges, maybe in a bad way to say this, but like that Yan's winning with each exchange, right? Like whenever the crowd roars and whenever Yan lands a punch, the judges are going to be like, "Oh, that's good that she landed a punch. We'll give her some points for that or whatever. But outside of that, there is one particular thing that I do think that Xiaonan will use effectively against Gomes, and that's going to be the body kick or the head kick. The height advantage of Xiaonan should allow that head kick to land at least effectively enough to shut down the shell and the guard of Gomes. Now I could go on a whole fucking rant about Yan and her background, I suppose, or her history, but as you guys said before when I did that, you know, there's no point because she's been in the UFC for so long, almost 9 years now. I just think that I will. I mean, I'm not on the fence anymore, but I am, you know, bending it a bit, half because I'm a fat shit, but also half because I am leaning slightly towards Xiaonan here, and that kind of emphasizes, or that's because of the whole crowd angle, the whole hometown advantage angle, all that stuff, right? Because if this fight is as close on the scorecards or is as chaotic as Will says it might be, I think the judges are going to see those chaotic moments favored towards Yan, because if they don't, and the crowd's been behind Yan this whole time, there's going to be a fucking, sorry, language. There's going to be a fucking, goddamn Tiananmen Square shit happening, right? And so I believe Yan should win on the scorecards. But as you can tell by the potential place bets box there, I am still on the fence. So over 2.5 rounds, that's my kind of like safety net there. So yeah, that's all I've got. Dom, you got anything to add?
Well, I don't have any bets, so I guess I can just speak freely about the fight. I did look into it a bit today. I've been thinking about it a little bit, been chatting back and forth with you guys about it. And, you know, I think it could be a close fight, and I take the main point here that the home advantage. I think it is a factor, because I think, you know, like you mentioned, the crowd, the time zone change. I don't think the time zone is such a big issue for Denise Gomes here, just because I checked, and she's been training at the Shanghai PI, as has Umar, which I didn't mention in my breakdown. Should have mentioned. Credit to Umar and Denise for both getting out there way ahead of time. So Denise Gomes, her first post from Shanghai was over a week ago. So we're recording this on a Tuesday. So that's, yeah, I think that's ample time to adjust to the environment, which is a good thing. Can see that she's been getting out and about around Shanghai as well, which is always good to relax in between training. And so yeah, that aspect, the time zone, I'm not too worried about. But yeah, I think the judging, because I think like I agree with Josh. I think this is highly likely to go decision, and I think there, you know, that slight edge could make all the difference on the scorecards when you hear the crowd reacting to shots. Yeah, I think the only other thing to mention here, really, of course, is that Yan Xiaonan's had a long amount of time off, which I don't think is a bad thing. You know, just because you take time off, it's not even that long. She fought in April 2025. I think that was a tough loss for her. I think she lost to Werner. I really watched that. It was a pretty boring fight. I remember betting on Yan Xiaonan in that fight. It was a wash, really. It was one takedown per round, the game over. Typical Werner Jandiroba. Before that, she beat Tabitha Ritchie, but Tabitha Ritchie, I think she flew out on short notice. So yeah, she was unprepared. She's tiny, and so don't really rate either of those. Can't read into them too much. Zhang Weili, I was pretty much one-way traffic. I know it's ironic that I was going to actually ask you guys, you know, the only knockdown she's got outside of the KO of Andrade is actually the champion, which is ironic, but she got thoroughly beaten in that fight. I know she kind of came back from like almost death. I think she was being choked out, or she was unconscious. There was some weird incident in that fight where the fight should have been stopped and it wasn't, and she somehow recovered and managed to fight on. So she's a tough girl, that's for sure. I think that it's I think I would lean to Denise Gomes as having the finishing upside. I don't know that I really rate Yan Xiaonan's power. I'm not saying she can't hit hard and frequently, because, you know, her stats are there. She does have good volume, But the knockdown of Andrade, don't forget Andrade was coming up from a weight class below. And if you look at Andrade's record, she's basically finished by everyone. I mean, she has a lot of finish losses, and that fight came amidst a kind of sequence of her fighting every 2 weeks. Like, she fought in January, she fought in February, and then she took the Yan Xiaonan fight in March or something. There was 2 months. It was just crazy. I don't know. She was going through a divorce and she needed the money or something. But it was just ridiculous how often Andrade was fighting, and she just walked forward with her hands down for that whole fight. She's getting pinged constantly by Yan Xiaonan. Speaking about technique, I do like Yan Xiaonan's footwork, and I like her jab. I think her jab and her footwork are probably slightly better than Denise Gomes. But then I went and watched tape on Denise Gomes, and there are things about her that I like. I mean, Will's already mentioned, she takes more chances. So when a fighter ties up with her, she'll usually try to sub. She'll get Mora. She got her in a guillotine, and a ninja choke at one point. So I like the fact that she's threatening subs. Of course, she has 3 KOs on her record in a smaller sample size of fights. So I think we can safely assume that the submission and the finishing upside is with Denise Gomes, and I assume that's why people are kind of that's probably what's keeping the line in check. Because I agree, the process and the sort of the points winning, the minute winning is definitely with Yan Xiaonan, and I think Denise Gomes is more of a moments winner, as Will said. I think there are some interesting things on Gomes' record. So I looked at the Mora fight. I was like, split decision with Eduardo Mora. That looks terrible on your record. So the thing is, at the time, Eduardo Mora, she was undefeated. So I don't know what her record was at the time, 8-0 or something. So, and then I watched the fight, and it wasn't a split decision. And then I looked at the scorecards, and 2 judges gave it 30-27 to Gomes, and then one judge who I'd never heard of before, his name was Christopher Edgehill. Who the hell is Christopher Edgehill? He gave 2 rounds to Mora. That's completely wrong. Just a very strange scorecard. So I think that explains the split decision to Mora. She basically, I think the problem is the decision she's winning. She's doing it quite convincingly. You mentioned getting outstruck by Pennington, but I watched that fight, and it's clearly a Gomes fight from start to finish. She's bullying a lot of these girls. She's beating the girls that are put in front of her. The Hill fight was in 2023, so 3 years ago now. But Hill did use takedowns. You can see 5 takedowns. That fight was pretty boring. Gomes is obviously a lot more threatening on the feet, but she spent a lot of time on the mat. And Angie Hill does what Angie Hill does sometimes. She's just going to keep fights close and squeak out a decision, and that's what happened there. So yeah, overall, I understand that I think Yan has definitely faced a high level of competition, even if she hasn't beaten that high level of competition. I just think this could be close. And if I was going to pick the fight, I would pick Yan Xiaonan. If I was going to bet the fight, I'm not really sure how I'd approach it. I think I'd probably lean Yan by decision if I could get plus money, which is not, unfortunately. It's because, as I said, she doesn't have a lot of finished equity, so decision is priced quite close to her money line. So I'm like, well, that's not super attractive to me. Denise Gomes decision, no action, probably would be a good look, but then they've priced that very much in favor of Denise Gomes. So again, it kind of leaves me no option. So right now I don't have a bet. I don't know if I'll get to it. I definitely will be cheering for Yan Xiaonan. And I think her winning by decision is probably the most likely outcome.
Right. Well, this is the fight that kind of stood out to me as a potential upset, and it's one that I highlighted in the UFC stats page. Let me talk about Lima first, because he is obviously the more familiar name here. He is the one who notoriously got bitten by one of his opponents earlier on in his career. Lima, during his fight against Borjas, has been something that has stuck to my mind for a while. And if he was to fight in a similar fashion that he did against Borjas then, in which he was too analytical, he was too patient, he was too clean, he is going to lose this fight. Now, the main reason why I say that is because Batbayar is someone who tends to be a bully in the cage. He is someone who disregards any kind of defense and goes for all offense, takedowns, punches, kicks, knees, and whatever the fuck. Anything that you can think of that an offensive striker will do, he will do. But Lima, given his technical prowess, given his kickboxing background, I want him to. I mean, he's not going to fucking listen to this. So first of all, why am I saying I want him? Anyway, I hope that he at least lets the trigger go more often. He lets the strikes go, because that's what led him to lose the Borjas fight. He was too much of a forward motion, aggressive fighter, but without the action. It's kind of like, I don't know, for a lack of a better way to say this, pointing a gun at someone but not shooting. Like, I mean, there's a rule in America, I think, if you're gonna aim, shoot, or whatever, one of those things. Anyway, I just think that whilst Lima might win this fight on the scorecards if it goes the distance, Batbayar has a huge finishing upside here, and that's what leads me to my bet here, I suppose. So if Dom should, yeah, thank you. 11.0 for a sub for Batbayar might seem like, what the fuck is he smoking, and is it crack? Can I get some? No. I believe that Batbayar's primary route to victory is to wrestle. Lima does have decent takedown defense, but it's also something that he has only felt when it comes to traditional takedown wrestlers and all that stuff. Batbayar is indeed someone who can be somewhat traditional when it comes to technique, but he's also someone who tends to explode for those takedowns. He is crazy. And the moment that he can assert himself on the ground, I believe that there might be an opportunity for a sub there. Now, I am not picking Batbayar to win by any means. This is just a bet angle. I believe Lima has the upside here if the fight goes longer than 5 or 7 minutes, strictly because Batbayar's striking and output, or wrestling output, is very high and unsustainable. So I have kind of two angles here. It's either going to be Lima by decision, which I should have really wrote there, or it's going to be Batbayar sub. And because of the sub is 11.0, I had to go with the sub, because it's just like a main pathway to victory, really. I mean, we've seen this so many times this year, like just last week, Emma's KO, that kind of thing. Like, there have been so many crazy upsets that I can't see Batbayar via sub not really being a big outlier. But it's just one of those wild fights. Like, Batbayar and his record, and I can talk about his record now because obviously he's making his debut. He did win the Road to UFC tournament a few months ago. He has a can-crushing history. His whole record prior to the Road to UFC tournament is nice on paper, but it's also just bad opponents. So, you know, it's like a highlight reel kind of thing for Batbayar, really. And I mean, I am very much a Road to UFC fan here. I mean, I'm pretty much the opposite of Will, who hates the Road to UFC. I love it. I could highlight all the fighters on it. It's great. It's an underrated tournament, and I'll leave it at that. But yeah, it's just one of those weird fights in which either Lima wins by being the more experienced fighter who takes the fight to the distance, or Batbayar, who is definitely a very good dog in this case, gets the fight to the ground and, you know, gets that submission going. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Does anyone have anything to add here? Dom, you have a fight doesn't go to the decision. Do you want to talk about this one, or?
Yeah, I don't have a lot to say here. I watched Batbayar fight, and he's just a wild man. So this is going to be a lot of fun. He's going to walk forward, and that pressure issue that Andre Lima was having with Borjas, and that's because Andre Lima's a counter striker, right? So he knew he had to pressure, but he doesn't want to throw the trigger. He doesn't want to pull the trigger because he doesn't want to get hit. And Borjas was throwing like heat, and you know, he was really throwing, wasn't he, with everything. So yeah, I think that's not going to be an issue here. We're going to have a car crash, or we're going to have an Andre Lima kind of masterclass step back, counter punching. Yeah, I don't think this Batbayar has any self-regard for his own safety, which is quite kind of like him. You know, he is chaotic. Like you said, I think if in the first 7.5 minutes, it's going to be a lot of fun. And if it goes beyond that, I think Lima's probably winning the fight. So, yeah, I find it hard to see this fight getting extended, just given what I've seen from Batbayar. But you know, he's had like what 10 fights and like none of them have seen the second round or something. So, or not seen the third round. So, yeah, it's going to be chaos. I think he's got a little bit of a chance. I've seen some people saying that Andre Lima, it's a buy low spot for him. So, you know, I did take the stab, a small stab on Batbayar, but I kind of get the buy low spot narrative on Lima. You know, he was, you know, people feel very let down by him in the Borhaus fight. You know, I bet on Borhaus there, so I was kind of kind of happy about that. But yeah, I don't know, Will, if you've done any more tape on this.
Absolutely nothing. Like I said earlier on, the whole Dana White's road to UFC thing kind of just a blind spot for me. Yeah, the Andre Lima side, though, I mean, I could very briefly say, yeah, super disappointing performance last time out. I mean, what odds was he against Kevin Borhaus? Yeah, it was like -700, -800. And yeah, boy, did he drop the ball. Borhaus is not highly rated. So that's the thing. Like, you would expect, because Andre Lima was getting a fair bit of hype himself, you would have expected the sheer levels of like potential between the two of them. For even though Andre Lima was having a bad day and not doing particularly well there, you still should be able to pull off the win. But yeah, it's tricky. I'm always talking about sample sizes, and I think you can be allowed one questionable underperformance, and I think Andre Lima did that. So I'm not saying, you know, massively recalibrate your expectations on him, but just be wary, I guess. So I think it's an interesting fight to think of from a betting perspective, because the books are currently probably scrambling. Like, how do you get a -700, 800 favorite that loses the decision? That shouldn't be happening. You've massively incorrectly priced it. So how much do they react? Do they cut him massively and think, well, he's half as good as we thought he was, he shouldn't be that dominant a favorite? Or, you know, do they say, oh, he just had a day off, keep him as he is? Basically, the books are a lot less confident in their stance on Andre Lima. Which, you know, he's -250, -260 here, which is, it could be a steal. It could also still be massively inflated. So I think it is a fight to be thinking about from a betting perspective. So if you do the research, as I have not done, hopefully you find some sort of angle. But yeah, I guess when you think, you got to think like the bookies at some point, and this is a confusing fight for them. And fights like that are the ones where you probably will end up making money if you do the work. So yeah, shout out to you guys for doing the work.
Okay, last fight to break down, and you know, it was pretty tough to choose a fight, to be honest. I was stuck between this one and the Sumaderji versus Alex Perez. Just a note on that fight: they fought already in Macau, and that fight was a no contest because it's Sumaderji or Alex Perez. Alex Perez, sorry, got caught in the groin, and they called off the fight, and so it was a bit disappointing. And they were lined very evenly for that fight. It was like, you know, even money, -110 a piece there. And now Alex Perez is, well, there's a bit of money coming in on him now, but he's 2-1, so he was like +200. I can see that people have kind of rejected. There's been resistance at +200. I think people have started to watch that first fight and be like, hold on a second, that first fight was competitive. I was saying to Josh before we came on, what biased the early bettors is I think they just remember that Sumaderji knocked down Alex Perez. So it did look like he was on his way to winning. But on the scorecards, Alex Perez won the first round on all the judges' scorecards. And after the knockdown, Alex Perez recovered and was still in that round before the groin shot. So it is an interesting one. And that was why I was kind of interested in Perez Sumaderji, and I was interested in the Perez side, but I kind of chickened it out. And you know, after taking some underdog losses, you just want to take a favorite. So, you know, spoiler alert, here I am taking Woodson. I do want to talk about deficiencies first on the Woodson side. You know, he he's like a very lanky, tall fighter, and Jack Farr Jenkins has amazing leg kicks. I think he has some leg, like at one point all he had was leg kick finishes in the UFC. So that's definitely going to be on the table here, because Woodson is primarily a boxer, so he's heavy on his lead leg, and he's open to get leg kicked. So it's not going to surprise me at all if Jack is attacking the leg early, and that's probably what's keeping the line in check here. Because if you talk about quality of opponent and experience and physical advantages, like look at the reach here. You can't see it because it's blocked by my bet. I'll take that off. 10 inches in reach. This is like a crazy like physical dynamic here. We've got a small featherweight against probably the biggest featherweight, probably one of the smallest featherweights on the roster, maybe the smallest, against possibly the largest. So 10 inches in reach and 5 inches in height. I mean, Jack Jenkins is going to have to jump to punch Sean Woodson in the head, and he often gets head kicks. Jack Jenkins, there's no chance of him getting a head kick on Sean Woodson. It would just be like a peck kick. Yeah, so I do like Woodson here, and I think the main reason I like him here is because the line hasn't gone out of control. I think he's priced similarly to Xianoan. He's in the minus 140, 1.7 something range. He's like fought a lot of really good fighters, and he's beaten a lot of good fighters. You know, he lost to Dan Ige and in his last fight, and I think that's why people are a bit low on him potentially, and why the line's a bit low on him here. But I watched that fight, and I actually thought he was winning the fight until he got stopped in the third round, and I thought the stoppage was frankly early. He was kind of annoyed about it. It wasn't the worst stoppage, but I thought it was an early stoppage, and I thought he was winning the fight 2-0. Before that, he was on a 4-fight winning streak. He beat Charles Jourdain, who's doing very well. Now he's gone down. He beat Alex Caceres, who's a good fighter. Before his winning streak, he's beaten Yusuf Salal. He's beaten Terence McKinney. So he has some good fighters on his resume. He's like 9-2 if you include Dana White's Contender Series. Jack Jenkins, on the other hand, is 4-2, or 5-2 if you include Dana White's Contender Series, and sort of fought a lower level of competition. He got beaten soundly by Gabriel Santos at home in Australia. That was a kind of the main red flag against Jack. The Chepi Mariscal one was an injury, and Chepi's a very good fighter anyway. He has a good win over Jamal Emmers. That's aged quite nicely. Outside of that, though, I think this is not good competition. Ramon Tavares is a bantamweight who came in at short notice. I just watched that fight. He looked so out of shape for that fight, and he managed to keep it competitive with Jack Jenkins. And like I say, Ramon Tavares is a bantamweight, and he just went the full 3 rounds. And Jack Jenkins seemed really relieved to have won the fight. It's like this guy came to Australia on literally a week's notice. So it was, for me, it personally wasn't a good look, that last win over Ramon. He's beaten, outside of that, I think Jamal Emmers in a split decision. That's his best win. Beating Herbert Burns is nothing. So I just don't know how good Jack Jenkins is. I like that he mixes in takedowns. I don't think necessarily he's going to have much success here because Sean Woodson has really good takedown defense. I just think it's a really tough fight for Jack Jenkins to win. And I think the only reason the line is where it is now, which is Jack Jenkins like plus 120, plus 130, is because of the leg kick narrative. Like, if he gets to Sean Woodson early with the leg kicks, then I think it could be a close fight. But if he doesn't, he's going to get peppered with jabs. Sean Woodson has really, really good boxing. I think Sean Woodson is probably more live to finish it with punches, but Jack Jenkins can obviously damage the calf, and that's the way he could get a TKO knockout. I'm interested to hear what you guys think, if you have any advances here, but I quite like Woodson at this price. I don't think it's like massive value, because if they opened at even money, that was the value. But I think Woodson, could be like a minus 170, minus 180, provided he doesn't get his legs kicked off in the first round.
Do you want to go next, Josh, or should I take it?
You take it, and then I'll chat a bit about Jenkins.
Cool. Yeah, it's a very complicated one, isn't it? There's so many asterisks on so many fights of both men. Jack Jenkins specifically is a weird one, and he's only had 6 UFC fights, and Dom's pretty much highlighted what's confusing about every single one. Even more so, the Jamal Emmers fight, quite heavily regarded as a massive robbery at the time. I think I was on Jenkins there, and I can't remember the fight at all, but public sentiment was definitely very angry that Emmers lost the fight. It's so difficult with Sean Woodson because I think I think it's really great when you have fighters who are like physically just massive anomalies like Sean Woodson or like Montel Jackson, because their fights are just like instinctively just interesting. Like I always want to see Sean Woodson fight because I want to see how the hell his opponent is going to deal with like this slender man that he's got in the cage with him. But the thing that's really interesting about Sean Woodson is that he is, when he's good, he's fucking dynamite. When he's bad, he's awful. And I think that is like what makes him very confusing from a betting perspective, because like I definitely agree with the sort of intuition that Dom's kind of landed on in thinking I think Sean Woodson's value, but I'm not super convinced, because that's basically Sean Woodson. When he's good, he's so good. Like his boxing when he's in like a flow state is incredible, and obviously the size advantage that he has, the length advantage, the way he uses it is also incredible. It really is beautiful to watch when he's like on point. But the man's also fucking lost to Luis Saldana. The guy has lost to Julian Erosa. Like he's just yeah, it's just tricky. He's also got a split decision win over Yusuf Zalal version 1, so that's not quite the same. But he's beaten Charles Jourdain. Like he's very impressive. I mean, to actually add a little bit more context to his last fight against Dan Ige, I think people were weirded out by that one as well, because Dom, you thought he was winning quite comfortably. Dan Ige won every round on every scorecard. He was 2-0 up on all 3 scorecards, which people were a bit perplexed by. So yeah, it's a high variance fight simply because of what both men have brought to the table with their UFC careers so far. But I think that if you sort of step back from all that noise and look at this fight logically as just 2 men with the bodies that they have and the styles that they have, I do agree. I think that, I mean, looking at Sean Woodson's breadstick legs, it does kind of concern me, the leg kick angle. But I think when you come into the UFC advertised as a leg kicker, I think it takes a little bit of time, but eventually you have to change that style because you can't be getting caught with it. I mean, look at Chris Gutierrez, right? Like, still a very good leg kicker and still a very exciting and interesting fighter to watch. But the book's written now. Like, it's not, you can't be getting a leg kicked by Chris Gutierrez across 15 minutes and that only be the issue, because he's, you should know how to deal with it. It's all you have to do. So you'd hope Sean Woodson's got the answer for that. And aside from that, the size difference, the experience difference, the fact that Jack Jenkins is hard to pin down and also potentially a little bit overrated. Yeah, I do think that this seems like Sean Woodson should be a little bit of a stronger favorite here. So I would say that if you bet on Woodson and he wins, you probably have a very, very good value bet on your hands. But if Sean Woodson loses, I think it will be like a flash KO moment in a fight that he is winning, which to me doesn't say that, Jack Jenkins was the value side. I think that if you bet Jack Jenkins at, what is it, like plus 125, you've taken a punt on an underdog and you've gotten lucky, but you've only paid plus 125 for it. Like, I think that Jack Jenkins is going to win this fight based off of like some sort of early damage which debilitates Sean Woodson, whether that's by knocking him unconscious or like really hurting his leg and sort of like stifling his ability to do anything. I just don't think Jack Jenkins is going to be able to put forward a cohesive, replicatable performance that doesn't rely on a particular strike at a particular moment changing the course of the fight. And that just doesn't sound like a minus 150 to plus 125 underdog situation to me. So I do think that, like, mathematically Sean Woodson is underpriced here and should probably be a bigger favorite. But when it's around that price tag, it is buyer beware, because like I say, it takes a single moment, but in that single moment you bet, you rip up the ticket because he's going to get knocked unconscious, if so, probably. So a complicated one, and it's very hard to know where to actually land. But I do think that Sean Woodson at around like minus 150 is appealing, because as I say, I can't shake the fact of thinking that if he does win the fight, he's probably going to look like fucking value for minus 150. So yeah, I'm kind of tempted. I'm not sure. I haven't done anything yet, but I'll keep an eye on it and think about it. Josh, over to you. You got your countryman, so hype him up.
I mean, I'll try, but there's positives on both sides here. Really, I'll break down Jenkins first. I mean, we've already spoken about the leg kick angle from Jenkins. That one's obviously going to be a a huge weapon for Jenkins to use because Woodson has no meat on those legs. It's all skin and bone. And so there's nothing to really mitigate that damage. It's all just nerves and all that stuff. So if Jenkins can leg kick effectively in the first round, he is likely to pull out a victory as the rounds go by because as Will said, it's one of those debilitating attacks in which it lasts for a while and it gets worse over time. However, that leads to a major issue when it comes to the reach of Woodson versus the leg kicking ability of Jenkins. Now, traditionally, when it comes to leg kickers who are very good at, well, kicking the fucking leg, really, they need to stay at that range. They need to stay at not only jab range, but they need to stay at that leg kicking range, which is an extra meter or so away from their opponent. Given that Woodson has that disgusting 10-inch reach advantage, which is absurd, by the way, Jenkins is going to have to retreat a lot. He has to step around the side a lot. He has to retreat and not look very good when it comes to aggression or visuals, really, because obviously when a fighter is stepping forward and letting their own strikes, they're winning the fight both on a octagon control angle and both on the damaging thing. So early on, expect Jenkins to be on the bike and to try and stay at that leg kick range. Now, here comes the issue for Woodson. If Jenkins does not use leg kicks, which he might not, Woodson has, and I'm going to catch flack for this, but this is something I've spotted for every single Woodson fight. He has no striking defense. And I call his defense the Struve effect. So, Stephen Struve, the tallest, longest heavyweight in the UFC, he had a reliance on using his reach and range as a defense. It was like a dome effect, right? Like no matter what, if his opponents were stuck at jab range of Struve's jab, they were pretty much stuck forever because they couldn't get past that jab and they couldn't get into their own offensive range. Woodson has the same sort of like defense here. He utilizes the jab range very effectively, but the very, very moment that any fighter gets within the pocket of Woodson, his defense falls out the window and it's just dead. This was evident when Danny Ige knocked Woodson down in the third round, leading to a very shoddy finish because people thought it was too early. I thought it was too early, but then again, Woodson was being hammered. Anyway, if Jenkins does not use leg kicks and steps outside of the lead leg angle, gets within the pocket, gets outside of the 90-degree cone of attack that fighters tend to use when boxing, because you cannot strike outside of that angle unless it's a very unorthodox and low power strike. Then Jenkins can land that left hook. That's the only kind of opportunity that Jenkins has, and we have seen Jenkins land a very good left hook before. He landed against his opponent before this one. I forgot his name. I apologize, but you know what I'm talking about. He is diverse in the feet. That whole leg kicking angle is only a gateway, really, or like one of those like, oh, he's like, it's in Barbosa, that kind of like highlight thing. I think Jenkins has multiple ways to win this one. I'm not picking him, by the way. I'm picking Woodson, but I did make Jenkins an old bet. No, I didn't. Sorry. But either way, if Jenkins utilizes that step in, step outside hook, he should be able to land a knockdown flush. But then again, it comes down to what Woodson's going to do. Now, as I said, Woodson and his 10-inch reach advantage is going to prove advantageous if he sticks to that jab. Now, oftentimes Woodson's and his straight attacks do land, but if Jenkins mixes in his offensive a bit, if he attacks the legs and makes Woodson kind of second guess the jab counter or the right straight counter, there's going to be opportunities for Jenkins to create an upset here. But the 10 inches is something I can't really ignore. It's something of an anomaly, And so that's pretty much why I highlighted the Woodson defense, really. He doesn't have any, so Jenkins has to step in and find the pocket boxing angle. But if Woodson does stay at jab range and does kind of dismissively keep Jenkins at bay, he could win by a decision. So I really wanted to pick Jenkins here. I really felt like he could create an upset here, but that 10-inch reached the disadvantage for Jenkins, as well as perhaps experience wise, it just doesn't really bode well for him. Although if as I said, I'm repeating myself here again, but one last time, if Jenkins gets within the range, within the pocket, and lands those hooks, it's going to put Woodson down and away. Woodson has zero defense. I cannot repeat that enough. His defense is absolute gutter shit. It's fucking terrible. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
All right, over to the bets. I'm literally just planted the flag on one person here. I got Xianoan for 4 units. I've only placed 3 units at the moment. I'm hoping for a little bit of a better price to add that final unit on there. I just think that there's value on the line here, as for the reasons I already mentioned. I did also mean to add in the plus 3.5 handicap for the other women's fight between Julia Pilastri and Jinya Zhang. I think that one should be a pretty competitive affair between 2 women who are quite flawed, but also just like enjoy a brawl. It just screams enthusiastic women's MMA striking affair for 15 minutes. And I think it's perfectly logical that the underdog wins around there. So I think that one's sitting around even money. So I'll probably play that for a unit and a half. But yeah, just the women's fights on me this week.
Yeah, not much extra here that I haven't already said. Song moneyline, just 1 unit. Woodson moneyline, just 1 unit. Had a sprinkle on Batbayar, half a unit. I think that fight doesn't go to decisions. That's my biggest bet is actually Batbayar. Lima does not go to decision. As I mentioned, I think Yan is definitely got a lot of decision equity in this fight. So I was interested in Yan by decision and almost playing both of these side by side. Gomes decision, no action, but the books have lined them, basically accurately, I think. So Yan by decision is like 1.8, which is just disgusting. I'm not playing that. When her money lines about 1.7, and Gomes decision, no action, I think it's something like 1.6, I think, or 1. Yeah, something like 1.6. I was just like, I don't know. I wanted it close to even money. I thought they might kind of misline it a little bit and think that the finishing, equity was similar on both sides. So, yeah, I guess, yeah, money line. I see where Will's coming from. So I'm interested in it, but yeah, back in my head, it's just like I'm not 100%. I have to think about it more. I have to do more tape. What have you got, Josh?
Yeah, you got a pretty boring slate, if I'm being honest. Now, let's go for the parlay first, because obviously the alt bets are a bit nuts, as you can see. But Pilastri Zhang over 2.5 rounds. I have a bit of a critical thing to say here about Pilastri here. I believe that. Wait, before I get started, I apologize. I have to ask one of you guys: is Pilastri the dog or the favorite?
Favorite.
Okay.
Minus 250, minus 225.
Yuck, that's not good. So I don't like Pilastri's defense that much. She tends to lean back a lot when it comes to, defensive movement. And if Zhang extends a combination that could both put this parlay leg in a danger zone, as well as put Pilastri down. So I'm a bit concerned about that leg. So over 2.5 rounds, it's whatever, but it's just a throw it away kind of thing. Woodson Jenkins over 2.5 rounds, we kind of spoke about that. Should be competitive, but also who the freak knows of a 10-inch reach difference there. Hassan KO. Hassan won on the Dana White's Contender Series a while ago, and it was a big finish and all that stuff. He's being set up for success here, and obviously he has the punch and power to get to get the job done. So I expect a KO there. And Shea Liu, a K1 kickboxing masterclass kind of fighter. He has fought a lot of cans, or I keep using cans as a fucking term. He has fought a lot of older fighters in those tournaments, but he does have the explosiveness and the power to get the job done. He is fighting Levi Rodriguez Jr., who probably doesn't have the same caliber of kickboxing, so I am leaning on the Shea Liu KO side there. Now the old bets. Angle, sorry, what am I saying? Borjas KO is something that stood out to me massively. Now, he is fighting Ray Soria, and Soria is a grappling genius. I don't know what Japan's doing, but they have produced some of the most craziest grapplers we have ever seen. And Soria, if he does get his grappling going, he is a trillion steps ahead of any opponent. He could be like the next Gracie killer for all I know. But because of the one-sided, one-dimensional kind of style that Soria has, I cannot ignore the Borjas KO because Soria is taller by 1 inch, so he might have to shoot a little bit lower, therefore be within the range for one of Borjas's excellent uppercuts, which we saw him land against Lima in their last fight. So there's a old bet there, and then the Nuzi KO is just something there because I was running out of old bets. So normally I have like 2 or 3, so I'm like, shit, what do I do? So there's that. So that's all I've got.
All right, that brings us to the end of the episode. And next week we'll be breaking down UFC Paris, which, in my opinion, is going to be a far more exciting card, both from a betting and a viewing perspective. I've already placed 3 bets on UFC Paris, so look forward to breaking down those fights with Will and Josh next week. Thank you for tuning in. As always, we'll be back